Her fork was still in the air when she said it. I'm leaving you. No warning. No emotion. Just 5 syllables flung across the table like a dirty napkin. The pasta hadn't even cooled. I hadn't even asked how her meeting went. But I guess that's how it happens when someone decides you don't matter anymore. She didn't blink. Just sipped her wine, eyes lazily drifting toward the window like she was expecting applause for finally saying it. I remember looking at the tablecloth. Pale cream, with little embroidered leaves. There was a stain on my side, a small one, like red wine, maybe. I kept staring at it instead of her. I guess I thought if I focused hard enough, I could unhear her. I didn't want to do this in public, she added, casually. But I needed you to know. She pushed her plate slightly away. Not far, just enough to show that she was done. Not just with the meal, but with everything. I think I laughed. Not because it was funny, God. It wasn't. It came out like a hiccup that got stuck halfway. My chest felt hollow, but I smiled anyway. That stupid smile I practiced in the mirror when things started falling apart and I thought pretending would fix it. She tilted her head, almost curious. You're taking this well. Am I? I asked softly. My voice cracked on the second word. I doubt she noticed. She was already scanning the room again. That's when it hit me, she wasn't alone in this. Someone was waiting. Someone knew she was about to detonate our marriage in a mid-range Italian restaurant surrounded by strangers chewing overpriced fettuccine. She glanced at her phone, flipped it upside down, and smiled. I'll come by tomorrow to pick up the rest of my things. She'd rehearsed that. You could tell. Clean lines. Simple delivery. Just another box on her to-do list. Ruined husband over dinner. And still, I said nothing. I just watched her. Her posture. Her nails. Her lipstick that was too fresh to be for me. She cleared her throat. I hope you won't make this ugly, Dorian. Ugly? She thought this was the pretty version? And then it happened. The bell above the restaurant door chimed softly. She didn't look right away. Why would she? But I did. And I smiled. Not the broken, trembling smile I wore 5 minutes earlier. No. This one had weight. She noticed. Saw the shift in my eyes. Her brow tightened, almost imperceptibly. Her mouth parted, just slightly. She turned. And then her face dropped. I don't mean it fell. I mean it collapsed. Like a mask cracking in half. Because standing at the entrance, scanning the tables, was someone she never imagined would walk into this moment. Someone who was supposed to be 3 states away. Someone who knew everything. She inhaled sharply, but no words came out. I finally picked up my fork, twirled some pasta, and whispered, "You picked the wrong restaurant." And now, she wasn't the one leaving. She was the one being left behind. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. She looked like someone had yanked the floor out from under her. Wide eyes, lips parted, completely frozen. Across the room, the man at the door stepped in slowly, taking in the scene with a measured calm that made her squirm. He wasn't angry. That would have been too easy. He looked curious. Like a person who just stumbled upon the truth and wanted to see how deep it went. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She turned back toward me for a second, almost instinctively, as if I could explain what was happening, or maybe she was checking whether I knew. But I didn't just know. I planned this. Every second of it. The man's name is Royce. Yeah, not a name you hear every day. He used to be my cousin. Technically still is, I guess, though I can't remember the last time he acted like family. He and Tessa hadn't seen each other in over a year, at least not officially. But I had my suspicions. The strange text messages. The sudden interest in running errands at night. The quiet phone calls she always took near the bathroom window. I convinced myself it was nothing, that it was grief over her dad, or stress, or me being a boring husband. But all the while, the truth was leaking through the cracks, and I was too spineless to lift the rug and look underneath. Until 3 weeks ago, when I did. I found the receipts. Hotel names I recognized, places I used to take her before we got married, back when love still felt like a shared secret. She wasn't even trying to hide them. Just tucked into a folder under tax papers, like their betrayal belonged in the same drawer as our mortgage. At first, I thought about confronting her, face to face. But I realized something then. She wouldn't flinch. She'd deny, gaslight, spin, maybe even cry. But she wouldn't tell the truth, not unless the truth cornered her with nowhere left to go. So I made a call. One call. To Royce. And you know what's pathetic? I thought maybe he would feel guilty. That maybe the word family still meant something. But he didn't deny it either. He just said, "It wasn't supposed to get serious, Dorian." That sentence played in my head every night. Like I was just the collateral damage of their bad timing. So I waited, quietly, patiently, for the right place, the right moment. And that moment came over Casio e Pepe and half a glass of wine. Now Royce stood near the table, hands in his coat pockets, looking at Tessa like he didn't recognize her. "You didn't tell him yet?" he asked, his voice low, careful. Tessa blinked hard, jaw tight. "What are you doing here?" she said, but it came out brittle, like glass under pressure. He ignored the question and looked at me. "She said she already told you, that you knew everything." Then he turned back to her, eyebrows raised. "You said he signed the papers, Tess." My heart thumped. Not from pain. That part of me had already shut down. But from the quiet confirmation I didn't expect to hear in front of so many strangers. Tessa's eyes darted between us, her composure unraveling by the second. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Then finally, "Can we not do this here?" Royce shook his head slowly, not out of anger, but something that looked like disappointment. "I drove 6 hours for this. I left work. I left everything." He leaned forward slightly. "You said this was handled." She looked down, and for the first time in years, she looked small. Not elegant. Not intimidating. Just small. Like a woman caught in a lie she couldn't charm her way out of. I should have said something then. Anything. But I just sat there, fork resting on the plate, heart numb, watching her squirm. Because I realized, this wasn't the beginning of a conversation. This was the end of an illusion. She wasn't some complex, mysterious figure I failed to understand. She was just someone who thought she could outmaneuver two people forever, even when they were related. Royce took a step back and looked down at her. "You lied to me. You said he agreed. That he knew. That you were starting fresh." She stayed silent. Even her hands had stopped moving. I finally picked up my glass of water, took a long sip, and set it back down gently. "She said she was leaving me," I said, quietly, almost to myself. But turns out, she was never planning to leave anyone. Just drag us both along until one of us gave up. Tessa's eyes finally met mine, and for a second, she looked like she might cry, but she didn't. She looked away, swallowed hard, and whispered, "I didn't know how to choose." Royce stared at her a moment longer, then slowly turned and walked out. No yelling, no drama, just silence. And somehow, that hurt her more than anything else. I didn't move. Neither did she. The food on the table was still warm, but it felt like we were sitting in a freezer. And I knew, this wasn't just the moment she lost both of us. This was the moment she realized she never had either of us at all. We didn't speak for 12 minutes. I know because the restaurant had a wall clock near the restroom door, and I stared at it the entire time. I watched the minute hand twitch forward as the world kept turning, diners kept laughing, plates kept clinking, and Tessa sat across from me in absolute, self-inflicted ruin. Her posture had collapsed. The confident smirk that usually lived in the corner of her mouth was gone. In its place was this fragile, hollow shape. A woman who had no idea who she was if no one was chasing her. And for once, I didn't feel the need to fix it. I'd spent years being her safety net, her excuse, her emotional punching bag. But tonight, she'd reached the edge of the cliff, and I just let her dangle. She opened her mouth once or twice like she wanted to explain something, but the words never came. Which made sense. What exactly could she say? "Sorry I strung you along while planning a getaway with your cousin." I didn't mean to fall for him. I just liked the drama. I imagined the rehearsed speeches she probably practiced in her head, all the justifications she thought she'd be able to use when she told me I wasn't enough. But none of them would work now, not with Royce walking out like that. Not with her exposed and unraveling. The timing, the control, the little performance she had prepared, gone. Royce had unknowingly stolen her spotlight, and I had quietly lit the fuse weeks ago. Finally, she tried again. "Dorian," but that was as far as she got. Her voice cracked on my name, and it made me flinch. Not because it hurt, but because it sounded so fake coming from her. Like she didn't even believe it anymore. I looked down at my hands, resting on the table like they didn't belong to me. I had once built a life with these hands, painted the nursery, hung curtains, carried groceries, rubbed her back when she couldn't sleep. Now they were just props in a scene I didn't want to be in. "You lied to both of us," I said, my tone lower than I expected. "You lied to me by pretending you were working on us, and you lied to him by pretending this was clean." She looked embarrassed, not devastated, not heartbroken, just embarrassed, like she'd been caught copying homework. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she murmured. Things got complicated." I stared at her for a moment, then actually laughed. It wasn't sarcastic or bitter, just stunned. No, Tessa, you made it complicated. All you had to do was be honest. But you couldn't even do that. I leaned back slightly and studied her face, wondering how many other versions of herself she'd been living. The confident professional, the perfect wife, the secret lover, the victim, all masks, all curated, all paper thin. And then she reached across the table. It was subtle, like she was testing the temperature of the air between us. Her fingers crept toward mine as if hoping muscle memory would save her, like we could just rewind the whole night and pretend it didn't end in disaster. But I didn't move. Not out of cruelty. I just didn't feel anything anymore. Her touch, once familiar, now felt foreign, like someone else was borrowing her hands. I don't want to lose everything, she whispered. Her eyes were glassy, but there were no tears. I didn't think she had any left. You already did, I replied. I think that was the moment it finally hit her. Not when Royce walked out. Not when I exposed her silence. But now, when I didn't take her hand. Because in all our fights, in all our messes, I always did. I always forgave. I always bent. But this time, I stayed still. The waiter approached awkwardly and asked if we were finished. I said yes. Tessa didn't answer. He took our plates, trying not to look at either of us too long. I handed him my card and quietly asked him not to split the bill. The look on her face when she realized I was still paying. It was small, but telling. She wasn't expecting kindness. And that's what made it more painful. As we stood up to leave, she said something I'll never forget. She said, "If you walk out of here, I don't know who I'll be without you." I almost replied. I almost turned around and gave her a piece of myself, a memory, a tear, anything. But I didn't. I just kept walking, past the host, past the wine rack, out into the quiet night air. And that's when I saw him again, standing across the street, hands in his pockets, staring up at the dark sky like he was trying to make sense of everything. Royce. He didn't notice me at first. He just stood there, still as a statue. I could have walked away. I should have. But something told me the story wasn't done. Not yet. I should have kept walking. I should have let the cold night swallow me up, hailed a cab, gone home, and started packing. But instead, I stood there like an idiot, halfway between the restaurant door and the curb, watching Royce stare at the sky like the stars owed him an apology. He looked different out there, under the streetlight. Not smug, not secretive. Just lost. I don't know what made me cross the street. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was the need to hear something honest for once. Or maybe I was just too pathetic to go home alone without hearing one more version of the truth. He saw me coming and straightened up. Didn't flinch. Didn't look guilty. He just looked tired. He shoved his hands deeper into his coat pockets and let out a breath like he'd been holding it the whole drive. "I didn't think you'd actually show," I said first, my voice quieter than I expected. "When I asked you to come, I thought maybe you'd back out the second she texted." "She didn't text," he replied. "Not after the call you made. She's been quiet ever since." I nodded, staring at the ground between us. "So you really didn't know I was still in the picture?" He winced. "I knew. I just didn't know how much you knew. Or how long it had been dying." I almost laughed. "It wasn't dying, Royce. She was killing it. Piece by piece." I looked up at him. "And you were handing her the knife." That one landed. He looked away, jaw clenched, like he didn't want to agree, but couldn't deny it either. It was strange, the way we stood there, two grown men who'd both been played, just in different ways. I'd been the steady fallback. He'd been the fantasy. And she'd been two people, depending on which of us she was standing next to. "She told me you two weren't even speaking anymore," he said eventually. "Said you were just roommates at this point. Said it had been that way for years." She said a lot of things, I muttered. "You believed her?" I wanted to. And there it was, the same pathetic honesty I saw in the mirror every morning. We both wanted to believe her. We both chose to. Even when the stories cracked. Even when the timelines didn't line up. Even when the guilt started bleeding through the smiles. It was easier than admitting we were just placeholders in someone else's script. "Did she ever say she loved you?" I asked, not even sure why. He paused for a long moment, then nodded. "Yeah, once. But it felt rehearsed." I swallowed hard. She used to say it like it was her signature. Like breathing. Then one day, she just stopped. I didn't even notice at first. Royce kicked a pebble off the curb, eyes distant. "I think I was just the escape plan. You were the reality." And she hated the fact that she couldn't live without either. We stood there a little longer, saying nothing, just absorbing the weight of what she'd done. It wasn't just about cheating. It was about manipulation, the slow kind that creeps in over time, turning two decent people into disposable options. And the worst part? We'd both let it happen. We hadn't fought for clarity. We just hoped we were the exception to her pattern. "I'm sorry," he said finally, and it didn't sound fake. Not just for what happened, but for the way I handled it. For pretending it wasn't real. I wanted to stay mad. I really did. But anger takes energy, and I had nothing left. Not after the meal. Not after the reveal. Not after that moment when she reached for my hand, and I didn't give it. "She told me she was leaving me tonight," I said. "Right before you walked in. She thought she'd beat you to the truth." Roy scoffed. "She didn't even tell me you'd be there. She didn't know you would be." He looked confused for a second, and then the realization hit. "You planned that?" I nodded slowly. I wanted to see what she'd do when her story had nowhere left to hide. He didn't respond. Just sighed and looked up again at the sky, the stars now obscured by slow-moving clouds. "She's not going to call either of us after this, is she?" he asked. "No. And if she does, don't answer." He nodded, and something about that moment, two ex-futures standing in silence, felt heavier than anything I'd felt in that restaurant. I turned to walk away. I didn't say goodbye. He didn't stop me. There was nothing else to say. When I got home, I didn't even take off my shoes. I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closet door, knowing it was half empty. Her scent still lingered in the air, vanilla and something expensive, and I hated how familiar it still felt. Then I opened the drawer she never let me touch. And inside was something I wasn't prepared for. Not a letter. Not a confession. Something worse. Something that told me this story wasn't over. Not yet. The drawer never looked special. It wasn't locked. It wasn't hidden. It was just always closed, always oddly off-limits, like the kind of boundary a person doesn't declare out loud but enforces with small gestures, a hand gently guiding you away, a shrug, a change of topic. I never pushed. I told myself it was her space, her privacy. Everyone deserves that, right? But sitting there on the edge of the bed with my coat still on and the restaurant scent still clinging to me, I didn't feel like I owed her privacy anymore. Not after the wine-soaked dinner theater she'd staged. Not after Royce. The drawer slid open with a quiet scrape. Inside wasn't chaos, it was order. Too much of it. Everything was arranged by shape and color. Envelopes stacked in two neat rows. A velvet jewelry roll, half unfurled. Receipts. Gift cards. Foreign coins. And at the very back, a small blue notebook. Not a journal. It didn't have a lock or an inspiring quote on the cover. Just a plain, unbranded thing with bent corners and a smudge near the spine. I pulled it out and opened it. And I swear, I stopped breathing. It wasn't a diary. It wasn't poetry or love notes or old sketches. It was a list. A literal checklist. Each page was titled with a different date, starting more than a year ago, and beneath each were numbered items written in her tight, efficient handwriting. But these weren't to-do lists about groceries or appointments. They were tactical. Calculated. February 17th. Confirm Dorian's quarterly bonus amount. Ask Royce about work trip dates. Backup texts. Change email password. Book motel for March 8th. Another page. May 3rd. Check mailbox before he gets home. Call Gina about spare key. Be extra sweet, he's suspicious. Cancel dinner with his sister. The deeper I read, the colder I got. There was no emotion in the notes. No sign of confusion or conflict. Just logistics. She'd been managing both of us like projects. Keeping Royce interested while keeping me steady. Lying in layers so thin and carefully folded that I wouldn't even know I'd been wrapped in them. And then I turned to the most recent page. It was dated last week, June 8th. Scheduled dinner at Harrow's Friday. Remind Royce I'm telling him. Pack bag for Sunday. Leave backup key at Mom's in case. There was a small underline beneath backup key. Like she wanted to remember that part. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't just leaving. She was preparing to come back. She had no intention of truly cutting ties. She was setting up the kind of exit where she could slide in and out of my life as needed. Still use my home. Still dip into comfort if the thrill went dry. She wasn't closing the door. She was propping it open. I dropped the notebook onto the bed and backed away from it like it had caught fire. My mind went fuzzy. I tried to hold on to some version of her that made sense, but it kept slipping through. I wasn't mourning a real marriage. I was mourning the idea of one. The version I carried around in my head. The one where she still loved me, deep down. The one where I wasn't just the easiest option. I opened the jewelry roll next, and that's when the real gut punch came. Inside, tucked between two dainty necklaces, was a small gold ring. It wasn't hers. It was mine. My grandmother's ring. The one I gave Tessa during our engagement after she told me she wanted something with history. I'd assumed she lost it years ago. She told me it slipped off in a hotel pool while visiting her cousin in Santa Fe. I even helped her search for it. She cried that night, or at least made it look like she did. I remember holding her while she said, "I feel like I failed your family." And the whole time, it was right here. Hidden. Preserved. Like a trophy. I couldn't cry. I wanted to. But the tears wouldn't come. I just stood there in my own bedroom. The room I painted myself, where I whispered promises to a woman who already knew she'd break them. Feeling like an extra in someone else's life story. I stuffed the notebook and the ring back into the drawer and slammed it shut. The sound was sharp. Final. And still she texted. 12 minutes later, as I sat on the floor beside the bed trying to remember how to breathe, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. "Can we talk tomorrow? Please." Just that. No explanation. No apology. Not even a name. Like I wouldn't recognize her number. Like I'd just wait. Like she still believed she had control. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. Because as much as I wanted to pretend I was strong, part of me was still waiting for her to really lie to my face. One last time. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I laid there with the lights off, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how many times I'd believed her when she said things like, "You're the only one who knows me," or "You're the only person I can be my true self with." Funny how those words sound like love when you're hearing them for the first time, and like a threat once you realize she probably said them to two people at the same time, one on each side of the bed. At around 3 in the morning, I opened her message again, just to see if I imagined it. It was still there. "Can we talk tomorrow? Please." No emojis. No punctuation beyond that desperate little please. It didn't sound like her. It sounded like someone who finally realized their parachute wasn't opening. But I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. I wasn't, not anymore. Something colder had taken its place. Not indifference. Not even clarity. Just this strange, sad detachment. Like I'd finally stepped outside the bubble she'd kept me in. I wasn't holding on to hope anymore. I was holding on to observation. I wanted to see what she'd do next when she realized the performance was over and the audience had already walked out. By morning, I'd packed a bag. Nothing dramatic, just some essentials. I needed space. I couldn't keep sleeping in a bed where I used to hold her while she texted someone else. I left the house around 6:30 a.m., before the city was fully awake. The streetlights still blinked tiredly, and the air smelled like concrete and dew. I didn't leave a note. I didn't even lock the bedroom door. I wanted her to walk in and feel the emptiness. Let it settle into her like a draft through a cracked window. I drove for an hour before I even thought about where I was going. Ended up at this old motel off Route 8, the kind with dim lights, ugly carpets, and vending machines that eat your quarters. I chose it on purpose. I didn't want comfort. I wanted reflection. I needed to sit with myself somewhere so quiet it echoed. Around 9 a.m., she called. I didn't answer. Then she called again. I watched the screen buzz. Tessa Halden. The name looked ridiculous now. So curated. So careful. Like everything else about her. I let it ring. Eventually, she stopped trying. At least with calls. Then came the texts. "Where are you? I woke up and you were gone. Can we please talk?" Not over text. "I'm sorry. I was going to explain everything. Please don't disappear. You don't understand how complicated it's been." I stared at that last one for a long time. I don't understand how complicated it's been. No, Tessa, you don't understand how simple it could have been. One conversation. One truth. One decision not to run off and juggle two hearts like a game of emotional roulette. It wasn't that I didn't want to talk. I wanted to say so many things, I didn't know where to start. But words, at that point, felt like handing her a script again. She thrived on dialogue. She knew how to twist tone and phrase into something sentimental. What I wanted now was silence. Something she couldn't manipulate. So, instead of texting back, I took a picture. I lined up the camera to show the motel key on the bedside table next to the small blue notebook I'd found in her drawer, the one with her strategy pages. And I sent it. Just that. No caption. No explanation. No context. The red notification came almost instantly. Then, nothing. 10 minutes. 20. An hour. She didn't respond. That silence said more than any apology she could have written. She wasn't sorry. She was caught. The whole thing only mattered to her now because she didn't get to control the ending. And suddenly, I could see her clearly, not as my wife, not as my partner, but as someone I used to know before she shaped herself into someone useful. I wasn't grieving the loss of her. I was grieving the disappearance of myself during all those years I stayed quiet, made space, softened every corner of myself so she could stretch out more comfortably. That afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Something told me it wasn't a telemarketer. I waited for the alert, then played it on speaker. It was her sister, Dorian. I don't know exactly what's going on, but Tessa showed up here in tears. She said you set her up, or something? She's not making much sense. Just pacing around my porch like she expects you to show up. She keeps saying you knew everything all along. Call me back if you want to, or don't. Honestly, I don't know who to believe right now. I didn't call her back either. Because the moment someone starts calling your clarity a setup, you know they've already started rewriting the story. She wasn't mourning me. She was mourning her ability to lie uninterrupted. And I wasn't going to give her that stage anymore. By the next morning, I turned off all notifications. The texts kept coming in anyway, Tessa's name, over and over, lit up my phone like a pulse I couldn't shut off. She alternated between begging and blaming. Please just talk to me, followed by, you manipulated the situation, followed again by, none of this is fair to either of us. It was like watching her try on different masks, trying to figure out which one would still get through to me. But the scary part was, a week ago, any of those messages might have worked. A kind word, a tear, and I would have folded. Not now. I was numb, but in a focused kind of way, like my body had decided to freeze everything that hurt so I could deal with the logistics of survival. And that meant one thing. I had to go back. Not to talk. Not to fight. Just to collect what was mine. I wasn't going to let her repurpose our life like a showroom. I wasn't going to leave it looking like I was the one who vanished. I wanted my name gone from the mailbox. My shirts out of the closet. My books off the shelf. I wanted the house to feel like her mess, not our memory. So I drove back. I waited until I knew she'd be at work. Not that I trusted her schedule anymore, but I figured she'd at least pretend to keep up appearances after the spectacle. Her car wasn't in the driveway when I pulled in, and the house looked off. Maybe it was the silence, or the way the curtains were drawn, like someone was hiding from sunlight. The key still worked. I half expected her to have changed the locks, but of course she hadn't. That would have required confidence. She was still hoping this whole thing would melt away if she just stayed still long enough. I moved quickly. Suitcases. Duffel bags. I didn't even take everything, just the things that felt like mine before we became us. The hoodie from college, the chess set my dad gave me, the box of old receipts she never cared to look through. I skipped the framed wedding photos on purpose. Let her deal with those. But when I opened the hallway closet, something slid off the top shelf and hit the floor. A small photo album. Not one I'd seen before. It was leather-bound, dusty, no label on the front. I picked it up cautiously, like it might bite. Inside were photos of us, but not the usual ones. These were candid. Ones I didn't know she had. Me asleep on the couch, reading in the sun, reaching for her hand in the grocery store. I stopped breathing for a moment, because next to every photo, she had written a tiny note in black ink. Just a word or two. Safe. Patient. Steady. Still here. But as I flipped further, the notes changed. Doesn't see it? Suspicious now. Must be more careful. Will hate me when he finds out. That last one was next to a photo of me fixing the bathroom light. I remember that day. She had come home late, and I'd stayed up to make sure the hallway was bright. I thought I was being thoughtful. She must have taken the photo while I was on the ladder. I didn't even know she was there. It wasn't just cruel. It was documentary. She was watching me love her and simultaneously preparing for the moment I'd stop. Suddenly, the room felt colder. Not physically, emotionally. Like the house had absorbed everything she hadn't said out loud and was exhaling it back at me now. I closed the album and tossed it in the donation box. I didn't want to burn it. I didn't want to keep it. I just didn't want it near me anymore. That's when the doorbell rang. I froze. She wasn't supposed to be back for another hour. I peeked through the window, but it wasn't her. It was a man. Mid-30s maybe. Neatly dressed, but not corporate. Leather jacket. Confident posture. He didn't look confused. He wasn't holding a package or glancing at a clipboard. He looked like he came for something or someone. I didn't answer. He rang again, then knocked, slow, deliberate. Dorian, he called out through the door. Hey, I know you're there. I don't mean to intrude. I just want to talk. I backed away. He waited a beat, then said, I'm not who you think I am. I'm not Royce. I'm the other one. My heart slammed into my ribs. The other one? I hadn't known there was another one. I didn't open the door right away. I stood behind it, barely breathing, trying to understand what the stranger had just said. I'm the other one. That sentence echoed through me like a bad dream repeating on a loop. Until that moment, I thought I'd already absorbed the worst of it. I thought I'd seen the whole picture: betrayal, manipulation, lies built into our everyday routines. But apparently, there was a part of the canvas I hadn't even looked at yet. I cracked the door open, just enough to see his face. He looked calm, not smug, not angry, just quietly resigned, like a man who had nothing left to lose or gain. I'm not here to make trouble, he said. I just thought, if you knew what I know, maybe it'd help you sleep again. Because I couldn't. I let him in. I don't know why. Curiosity? Some last shred of self-respect, hoping I'd finally get the full story? He stepped in like he'd done it before, like he knew the place, and that realization stung more than I wanted it to. But he didn't touch anything. He just stood near the kitchen counter and folded his hands. My name's Theo. I met Tessa a little over a year ago. She told me she was separated. Said she was staying with a friend. We were both in this grief group thing after my sister passed. He looked down at the floor. I didn't know she was married until 5 months in. She said she was finalizing everything. I told her I didn't want to be in the middle of anything messy, and she promised it wasn't like that. Of course she did. That was her specialty, rewriting the story based on who she was talking to. Theo continued, I ended things when I found out about Royce. Didn't even know about you until I saw your name on a prescription bottle in her car one night. He shook his head. That was 2 months ago. Why come now? I asked, my voice flat. Because I figured you had a right to know. Because she used the same words with all of us. She said we were her peace, her safe space, her future. He looked at me then, really looked. I don't know what she told you about me, or if she ever did, but I just want you to know, I left. The second I saw the lies weren't stopping, I walked away. I believed him. Not because I wanted to, but because there was no smugness in him. No lingering attachment. Just the wreckage of someone who also loved the wrong version of a person. We weren't rivals. We were proof that she didn't just lie once. She built an entire world made of mirrors and stood in the middle hoping no one would see the cracks. We didn't talk much after that. He left quietly. I didn't offer him a drink. He didn't ask for anything. It was just information exchanged. And maybe that was the final thread I needed to cut. That night, I didn't sleep in the motel. I didn't sleep in our bed either. I sat on the porch. The air was warm. Still, I could hear an owl in the distance, someone's sprinkler ticking on a nearby lawn. Life was still happening, and I was still in it, even if the version I thought I was living was long gone. Around midnight, her car pulled up. She got out slowly, like she wasn't sure whether to knock or not. I didn't move. She looked thinner than usual, tired. Her voice cracked slightly when she finally spoke. I don't even know what to say anymore. You don't have to say anything, I said. I never meant for it to go like this. I know. She stepped forward. Is there anything you want to ask me? I thought about that for a long moment. There were 100 things. 1,000. But none of them mattered anymore. They wouldn't give me closure, just more pieces of a broken puzzle I no longer wanted to complete. So I said the only thing that felt real. No. I'm done asking. She nodded. No tears. No tantrum. Just quiet acceptance. Maybe she finally saw that the version of me who'd been to keep us together was gone, and the man sitting here now wasn't angry, just done. She turned and walked back to the car. No goodbye. And that was okay. I sold the house 2 weeks later. Moved 4 hours south. Got a job in a library, of all places. Something about silence and order felt right. I started drinking tea instead of coffee. I bought a bike. I stopped checking social media. No grand reinvention, just small repairs. Some days, the memories still knock on the door. But I don't answer anymore. Because the truth is, she left me long before she said the words. And the best thing I ever did was finally leave, too.